Hi, it's Ursula from ursula-smith.com, and today I'm going to do another experiment. In the past, I have used Distress Oxide sprays through a stencil, and then did a resist technique where I used normal Distress spray stains over the top. Then the second experiment was to use Distress Oxide ink pads with a stamp and do the same thing, spray over the top with the regular Distress spray stains. Again, for that resist result. But I only have a couple colors of the Distress Oxide ink pads. So I was wondering, and that was going to be my experiment today, is if the Distress Oxide sprays would work on an ink pad. So I'm going to give that a shot. So again, with the Distress Oxide sprays, you want to shake them to mix up all the pigment. And then I'm going to spray. Try and get some good coverage. And then use a piece of cardstock to go over the top. And transfer the spray stain to the cardstock. Okay, not bad. It's probably not quite as clear or as crisp as if I were to use an ink pad, but close enough. I'm trying to decide which spray stain to use. Okay, so that was, let me see, Wilted Violet. I'll try Shaded Lilac first. So I'm going to spray. Now again, remember this is just the regular Distress spray, water-based, not pigment-based. So I'm spraying a little bit of that, and okay, this is tumble glass. This may not work, but I'm going to give a couple of shots of that. And then once again, like in the other techniques, we're going to set it aside to dry. And when it's dry, I will be back. So I'm back, and here is, I took a heater and dried some of it so you can see it starts to dry a little bit lighter. This part's still pretty wet. But the Distress Oxide spray on the stamp did, again, resist the normal spray stain. And so, because I don't have a lot of the Distress Oxide ink pads, I can use the spray on my stamps for a similar effect. Now here's another one I did, and I don't know whether I just moved the image, but I suspect that the spray stain is going to give you a less crisp image, but still not bad. And that was the Mermaid Lagoon with bundled sage. That's still pretty wet. It will probably dry a little bit softer. And then here's another example. So this looks like a mess. This was the same thing. I sprayed Distress Oxide sprays. I think I used the Wilted Violet on the stamp and then stamped the cardstock. But then over the top, instead of using the Distress spray stains, I had some of these Dilutions ink sprays kicking around, so I decided to try that. And you can see it kind of made a mess, so you can't really see the stamped image very well up on the top. Now down on the bottom, I was like, well, before I toss this in the garbage, maybe try bringing the Distress spray stains over the top to see what it does. And so just spraying over the dilutions, it does look like it brings back some of that image. So I'm looking for another color here. So some of it does come back a little bit. So I may be able to salvage that yet. I'm going to let it dry and I will be back. So I'm back and I just wanted to show you something else. This is a little bit different. So this, interestingly enough, I decided to try stamping with Distress Oxide ink on a stamp. And then I used the Dilutions ink spray, and this time it didn't smear the ink. So I don't know, maybe when I sprayed the Distress Oxide spray onto the stamp, it might have been just too kind of wet, and then when I came over it with the Dilutions, it kind of spread the ink a little bit, and that's why it was a little blurry. Here's what it's looking like now. It's not completely dry, but you can see coming back over with the Distress spray stains brought back the pigment a little bit better. So it's a little bit crisper now than it was before. It was just kind of a blob before. And the whole reason I was interested in this was I wanted to try and get like a variegated background. And so I didn't have the pink in the Distress spray stain, so that's why I was using the Dilutions. So now we can get some different colors in there. I thought I had a purple. Oh, here's a purple. It's kind of super purple now. So that's a few colors of ink, and then maybe try a little bit more of the Dilutions and see if that still works. That may be muting it a little bit more. Maybe not. Try and bring some stormy sky in there. Okay, I think that's enough. I'm gonna let it dry and I will be back. Hi, I'm back, and so I wanted to show you the final fully dried results of this time. I used Distress Oxide spray on a rubber stamp, stamped the image, and then came back over with regular Distress spray stain. I have so much trouble saying that. And then it resisted the Distress Oxide, so that image still came through. So here's the fully dried examples. Again, maybe this one a little bit could have been the way I stamped it, a little bit less crisp than a regular stamped image with ink, but came out pretty good for a quick Take 5 project. And then this was the one where I kept just spraying over it. I used some Dilutions spray stain over the top and then came back over it with more Distress spray stain. And the Oxide still resisted it and kind of came back a little bit. And that, I believe, was a little bit drier when I did that, so it still stayed fairly crisp. So that one, actually, I would still end up using. So I call this another successful Take 5. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.